Salam alaikum, part 2 of my short biography on day 9 of Ramadan. Now, at age 15, I left the Catholic high school. It was called Arlington Catholic High School in Massachusetts. And I went on to have 2 marriages and 1 son. It's now 3, but we're just talking about the past now. My dad was president of a life insurance company, and he wanted me to be a CPA. I won't go through the years of trying to study accounting and the college I went to. It's so irrelevant because I didn't like it, but I wanted to please my dad. I always wanted to please my dad because I favored my dad over my mom. And I think it's because my dad was very quiet, never heard him raise his voice, and he was very cerebral. He'd come home from his company. I don't want to say his job because he was the, what's it called? What do they call those corporate people? It's not like chairman of the board is what he was, and president. And he would come home, pour himself a scotch, of course, because he was coming home to a wild house of children that my mother was never really much of it. Well, she couldn't control my brothers. And even though she always had maids, she was so different from my dad's mom, my Grandma Rosie, who was a Marine drill sergeant. She had 13 children. And when they'd argue, my dad would always say, Beatrice, lower your voice. You can get more flies with sugar than you can with vinegar. And my mom would say, oh, easy for you to say in your air-conditioned office with your little secretaries hovering around you. You don't know what it's like to be here at home with all of these children. And my dad would say, stupidly, he shouldn't have done that. He'd say, well, my mom had 13 and I never heard her raise her voice. You know why? Because Grandma Rosie was praying all the time. She used to go and climb the hill in the dead of winter every day of her life to pray Fajr, yes, at the church in Somerville, Massachusetts. She'd leave the house asleep. You see, these are the things that when you're witness to this as a child, they don't leave you. You're constantly comparing and contrasting who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. Well, maybe not every child, but I was always so overly analytical with everything. I would never take anything at face value. I would have to delve into details and then come to conclusions. Perhaps they were all wrong, but I'm just giving you my biography to see how this ever happened. We had 2 homes. The summer home was in Situate, Massachusetts. It was called the Irish Riviera. It's where all the rich people lived. They would buy their summer home in Situate, Massachusetts. And we were warned, every one of us, the uptown girls, don't get involved with the townies. Do not even talk to those boys down at Sand Hills Beach because they're trouble. They're not like us. And once again, they're not like us. That resonated in my mind. Well, what do you mean they're not like us? Well, of course, you know where I went. The minute when I turned 14, I was right down at Sand Hills Beach. In total rebellion, my dad said, no, you go to the country club, you go to the yacht club. My dad even moved one summer house that we had from the time I was taught. And when I turned 12, he moved to another summer house because it was closer to the yacht club. And he didn't want us being involved in whatever went on with the townies on the beaches. You wouldn't get it unless you were part of this type of family, but I got it right away. And the first thing I wanted to do was to meet the townie boys. Long story short, my first husband was a townie. And it was rather a scandal, but I don't want to go into details because I never go into gory details about the men in my life. I feel it's not polite and it's not going to help anything. I can give you the generalities, but all I can say is we met in the library. He was a total bookworm like myself. He was, his dad was Irish, his mom was Swedish Norwegian, so he was 6'2" and very handsome. Kind of that Viking look. These are not details though, these are just observations. My third husband was Egyptian. So you can see the difference. And then the middle one was baseline American, black belts in karate. I was very eclectic in my choices. The only region, I will say this as a woman, and men and women are listening to me, this is real. The only time that Satan could really trick me was with men. And you know, that's well known. Muslims know this. Be careful. Male-female relations should be monitored. Strictly monitored. You know, my grandma grew up with chaperones. We should have always kept chaperones. And you would not be allowed to get involved unless the man would go to the family and ask for your hand. And then they had to approve of him. And all of these things are correct. And they're all Islamic. And I think Islam is just going to bloom in America now because so many women my age and under have been traumatized by being left to their own resources. I'm digressing again. Anyway, my first husband read poetry and he was not religious, and that was good because there would be no conflict. My second husband also was not religious, so there was no conflict there whatsoever. He was a nominal Protestant, but not really practicing. Now, my dad warned me to stop the PhD. He said, do not go on with your education. This is my second husband. And I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, the master's is enough. You're already overly educated from your husband. Men don't like that. Men don't like women more educated than they are. And my dad never had heart-to-hearts with me. Never. He was always working, always at the office, always at Patton's Bar on State Street, Boston, meeting up with his cronies, who were all the banksters. And, you know, this is a part of my trauma. I was raised in just total haram, you know, not just riba and life insurance and banking, but drinking and oh, so much mixing, the parties at the yacht club, and all the wives would be decked out. It was kind of like a Trump and Melania thing on a smaller scale. My dad kind of looks like Trump. Well, may Allah let him rest in peace. I became a Muslim after he died. So we have now 2 more minutes. Yes. My dad warned me I wouldn't listen. And I said, Dad, it's a new day. It's a new world. Women can be overly educated and husbands don't mind. It's not like you and Mom, because my mom never went to college. So my dad could be like the oracle in the house. He knew everything. And my dad once teased my mom. I'll never forget it. She's the one that told me about it. They were out to dinner with their fancy friends, and they got into something about wives being cared for, so to speak, and who had the harder job, staying home with the children or being married to a millionaire. And the wives were all, you know, teaming up. And my dad said, listen, this story my mom told me, and he was laughing. She can't even write a check. I take care of everything. And my mom said, what do you mean? He said, write a check here. And he took out his checkbook and he took out his pen and he said, go ahead, see if you can pay the electric bill. You don't even know how. And they all laughed at my mom. The men laughed. That story, I can't tell you how much it affected me. I felt sorry for my mom because my mom had 8 beautiful children and she devoted herself to her husband because that's what she was supposed to do. But you know, my mom never prayed. My mom never prayed. That's why I always preferred my dad as a parent, because he never screamed like my mom, and he always prayed by his bedside, kneeling, morning and evening. So even though I didn't listen to his warning, he said it would destroy your marriage. And it actually did, because within 6 years of my second husband, I was divorced. So Egypt begins in 1988. I'll have to do another video for Egypt because maybe I'll let that wait though. We'll go back to the Quran and the Hadith. And in your comments, tell me if you like this story. Tell me if you like the black and white. They used to call the nuns penguins back in the day. But I have nothing against the nuns. Nothing at all. But on my other channel, the new one that will be historical, I will go into details about the history of the Catholic Church and also the history of the seminaries and the convents and how they were able to maintain their whole edifice by not letting people get married. So your servants, your faithful servants of the Vatican, they weren't allowed to get married. They must have known something. Till we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.